This episode is brought to you by the American Homebrewers Association, host of HomebrewCon Online, a virtual gathering of homebrewers happening this week, June 18th through the 20th. With an all-star lineup of speakers, HomebrewCon Online is an opportunity to enhance your brewing skills and knowledge, all from the comfort of your own home. Tune in for live seminars, demonstrations, virtual expos, meetups, and happy hours. Learn more and register at homebrewcon.org. That's homebrewcon.org. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, June 18th, 2020. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Dan Schreffler of Space-Time Mead and Cider Works shares 4 delicious beverages, 3 based on honey and 1 on maple syrup. And Dan, of course, shares tips on how we can make similar things at home. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. If you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find DVDs, our brewers' logbooks, and other basic brewing gear. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and thanks to everybody who is helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see the long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. And this Friday, I'm planning to post to financial subscribers an early release of my small batch Brew in a Bag Captinus episode, inspired by my conversation with Mars Larius Garshol. I tried to bring some extra flavor and caramelization to a 100% Pilsner malt beer by roasting grain in the oven. And I don't think you'd call the result traditional, but it was delicious. Spoiler alert. Upper tier supporters on Patreon will get an extended behind-the-scenes video that's around 13 minutes long that kind of shows the process, as it evolved as I was doing it. You have plans to do something, especially when you're trying something new on Brew Day. Sometimes things go the way you plan and other times they don't. So if you get the behind-the-scenes video, you can kind of see the process of how that evolved. I'm looking forward to HomebrewCon Online this week. That'll be a new experience, attending from home for all of us. But I'm hoping that, more people will take advantage of that since you don't have to travel this year. You can attend HomebrewCon from your chair. I'm looking forward to all the excellent information coming down the line from that. Speaking of electronic communications, let's take a quick look into the mailbag. Since we're talking about meads this week, Aaron in Portland says, I really enjoyed the mead shows with Tim Lieber. Oh, excellent. Aaron says, I thought you'd be interested in my experiment with using Kveikking from Imperial, the only yeast I use nowadays. Wow. I had acquired some fireweed honey, which has an even more intense flavor than buckwheat, with some barnyard notes. I wanted to go crazy with it, so combining it with my love of Star Trek, I decided to make a Klingon-inspired mead. Aaron says, I used the honey along with dark candy sugar, brown sugar, cinnamon, clove, dried chili pepper, and prune juice. Aaron says, I pitched the yeast and let it ferment in my glass carboy outside in the summer, so it never dipped below 85 to 90 degrees. Not gonna lie, Aaron says, it might be one of the best meads I've ever made. Complex and rich. It's great to sip after a meal or slaying tribbles. Just let them eat the poison grain. You don't have to worry about slaying them. So Aaron says, I highly recommend using the strain at highest temps. Makes for an interesting mead. Thanks, Aaron. If I knew any Klingon language, I'd say some right now. It sounds like a lot of fun. I have a pouch of Kveikking in the fridge, so maybe it's time for a big, hot, fermented mead. You guys are inspiring. Speaking of inspiring people, let's talk about our friends and sponsors, Desiree and Dave of High Gravity in Tulsa. I've gotten some questions recently about my system that I got from High Gravity. It's the 240-volt brew-in-a-bag system with the Warthog EBC 130 controller. And one thing I don't talk about much is the small footprint. When you go to store it, everything fits inside that 62-quart kettle, and, it just sits in the corner of my basement. It's super handy. But the Cajun Cooker Kettle, or the Bayou Classic Cooker Kettle, is not the only option if you're looking at a similar setup. In fact, if you use the Build Your Own Brewing System feature on highdgravitybrew.com, there are a ton of options you can choose. Kettles, different hot liquor tanks, chillers, controllers. You can get the system that's right for you. Or if you're like me and need some help speccing out a system, highdgravitybrew.com has a selection of turnkey electric systems that fit the way that you want to brew. And not only Warthog systems from High Gravity, but other manufacturers as well, from 5 gallons to 2 barrels, single, dual, or 3-vessel configurations. highdgravitybrew.com can take the pain out of propane. And if you use the code EBC75BB, you can save $75 off your electric brewing purchase. Check it all out at family-owned and operated highdgravitybrew.com. Okay, this was a very tasty conversation. They're making some delicious stuff up there at Space Time Mead and Cider Works up there in Pennsylvania. And I greatly appreciate Dan Schreffler for sharing some of his wares and, of course, his knowledge. Dan Schreffler, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
It is a pleasure to be here. A pleasure and an honor, actually.
The pleasure and honor are all mine. Anytime people send me delicious beverages and then want to talk about it, I've got the best job in the world. What can I say?
Yeah, I found that by sending wine gets me into a lot of places.
Especially when it's mead. Which used to be a rare thing to find, but nowadays is mead getting more, sort of accepted and popular?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. The folk that know it from when I started. I mean, if you think about 2008, if you were talking about mead, the odds are you were talking about it over a Dungeons and Dragons game rolling a D20.
or wearing some sort of medieval get-up. Drinking.
You've seen my MySpace page from days gone by.
You're dating yourself. What is this MySpace thing that you talk about, Dan? I have no idea. I'm too young to know about MySpace.
Yeah, it's gained quite a following, largely from the craft brewing community is really the ones that have accepted mead more so than I would say the grape wine drinkers. And that's actually been part of my mission in the last 2 years of actually reintroducing honey wine to grape wine folk.
So how did you get into winemaking and mead making?
I was always what my uncle would call me, a stem man. So we would go to a bar, he'd have his beer, and I'd have a glass of red. And went to Ireland. Ireland was like 2007, somewhere in there, and discovered Guinness at the bar and fell in love with the beer because I really never liked the yellow fizzy stuff. One is I didn't think it was that flavorful, and two is there was a lot of bad examples of drinkers in my family, so there was a natural boundary away from that. In my line of work, I had a chance to travel to the West Coast and discovered craft beer, and just fell in love with what was possible, and then started homebrewing. And shows like yours and Brewing Network and my local homebrew club and friends and homebrew stores all got me passionate about this really good outlet for creativity. And after a few batches, I'm like, we can make mead, we can make wine too, and just really fell in love with mead. This went back to my kind of wine drinking side. And really, really enjoyed it. And it was fun just to talk about it, the novelty of it.
What did you find were the keys to making better meads as you got along?
I guarantee I made the stereotype meads. There's 2 stereotype meads that folk have had, and why sometimes they say, I don't like mead, because they either had one, it would be the the flaccid Renfest sweet stuff with no character, no, there was no body or anything, or they had what I would call jet fuel in a bottle.
Oh yeah.
High fusel alcohol, and I made a bunch of those. And some of them are still cellaring, hoping that they get better. And I pull one, and it's still like, yeah, that's jet fuel.
It's hard to give up on them, though.
I guess it's like having a child that no matter what you do, he's going to end up in jail. But you got to give him a shot. And it was shows like yours and the American Homebrewers Staggered Nutrient Additions and that just said there's a science to it, and then winemaking techniques and that to the point where we're making some pretty darn drinkable and crowd pleasing meads.
Now you sent me 4 bottles, and the name of the meadery is Space Time Mead and Cider Works, and you're up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we are, if folk are familiar with the show The Office, we are next door to Scranton, home of Dunder Mifflin, a little community called Dunmore, a nice walkable urban space. Really, really love it in Northeast Pennsylvania.
And how did you go pro, or how did you first get the itch, and then how did you go about it?
Long story, so it's have a lot of tape. It's a good story though.
Well, I'm opening a bottle of mead, so I got
perfect. Time. And that's what mead is for, is poetry. When I first went to school, I knew I was going to work hard, make money, but I never wanted to be in a situation where I dreaded the job day to day, particularly toward the end of retirement. So in my head was retire at 45. That was scrimp, save, live within our means, and get a good paying job and get good at it. And luckily, I was employed by a large insurance company for 26 years and did all right in life. 2010, was diagnosed with cancer, and that will give you what's called perspective as well as impatience as a side effect.
Wow.
So when, I was talking about, thinking about originally, what do I want to do? How do you want to spend your life? And as much as I enjoyed my work and made money at it, it's like, is it really something I want to retire at doing? And the answer was pretty clear to me that no, it is not something I wanted to do. So I pretty much spent a good 8 years or 7 years plotting my exit strategy, and originally thought I was going to open a brewery because I was really, really into beer at that point too. And then just kept getting back to I really like wine. I make good mead. There's no meaderies around. At the time, there's only a couple in Pennsylvania. And I thought we can make our mark doing this. And so it was really a good 8 years of serious contemplation, planning, and making sure that financially we can do it. Do I want to ruin a hobby or not kind of perspective? And said, yeah, we can do this. Knowing ourselves in terms of are we set up in terms of 401ks, healthcare, all those things that often when you go to a Going Pro seminar, folk aren't talking about.
Yeah, you got to set up the business part, or you can't make the mead part. Yeah. When
I go to the American Homebrewers, American Mead Makers, there's always that Go Pro session, and it's all the questions are on production and equipment and that's 10% of this. The other 90% is, can I run a business? Is it something I want to do? Do I want to be filling out paperwork and cleaning the storefront and more importantly, doing the marketing calls and the sales pitches to move the product? Production's easy. It's selling that's the hard part.
Yeah.
And do you have the personality to do that, or people around you who could fulfill that, and you have to pay them? So all that self-analysis that I was doing for a good 7 years.
And there are plenty of businesses that have wonderful products, and restaurants that have great food, and breweries that make great beer. but then they don't go as far as they could have just because the numbers don't add up, or like you said, the personality of the people who are making the great products. If they don't connect with the public and they don't move the product, it doesn't go. The business just doesn't survive.
Yeah, some breweries I've come across, and it's a good thing they had brewers locked up in the back, because if anyone would talk to him, you would never buy off the guy. He's lucky he has a good frontman or front people. Yeah, so it really is know thyself. There's a lot of passion behind, oh my gosh, it would be great to do this, and it always sounds like the dream job, but it's a lot of hard work for largely minimum wage. So that's the contemplation folk have to do. And I was at the stage in my life where I was working 60 to 70 hours in corporate America, which, to a point, made some money, but it was also sucking some soul out. So this, I'm not making as much, but I have a solid foundation to do. Really, we're in a small winery. This space I'm in is about 60 by 40. We're a nano winery, and we know that we're not gonna, I'm not gonna make $100,000 here, but I'm going to make enough to supplement pensions and pay for healthcare and stuff. So it's just a matter of setting expectations up front, but really, really looking broadly at what it takes to run the business. And you know what? You might be better off working for someone else, taking a sick day or a vacation on their, part of your business, and then brew during that time off, and not make that a business.
How big of a footprint do you have as far as employees?
Well, we had at the end, we're only 2 years old, so we had 4 part-timers. Not a lot of hours. This was supplemental income to do events and tasting room. Now, particularly with COVID, we scaled back, and they're actually mostly collecting just due to their other jobs right now. So we're able to weather this simply because we have not overextended ourselves from the beginning.
Yeah, it's a tough time for sure. And we've been talking to professional brewers, and their different breweries are approaching it in different ways, and being affected in different ways.
Look at our friends and the amount of money they have invested in their facilities and trying to make payroll, and people who are actually depending upon them for their livelihoods. And I'm blessed, lucky, or the results is I self-funded, so we'll weather this. The only loan I have to pay is to myself. So so we just have to pay utilities, our insurance, and our licensing fees. Otherwise, we'll weather this pretty fine. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary, but we'll be all right.
Well, I'm sipping on the Andromeda.
You got it. You got it. Andromeda.
It's spelled MEADA, but it's beautiful. It is a pale yellow color, and it smells delicious, and it tastes delicious. It's just a nice, solid, straightforward, your basic mead, right? Yeah. We were playing around a little bit. Generally, if you're using wine yeast with mead, sometimes you don't get some complexity. We decided to play a little bit with Lanolин's Abbey Ale. It's a Belgian ale. So that's why you're going to get that peppery spice in the nose and actually in the finish. So we found this to be an awesome introductory mead to folk, particularly the ones that said, I don't like mead because I had some bad. And this one breaks the ice in both the craft brewers and the grape wine drinkers community. It's got a nice level of sweetness where it's not cloying, but then to go along with that basis of sweetness, there's also a little bit of acidity on my palate, at least at this time of the day.
Rinsing out the toothpaste.
And the coffee. But do you talk about how this is, what goes into this, and from a homebrewer's perspective, they're going to want some details that, where they can make a mead as delicious as this.
Yeah, definitely. For this, our local wildflower honey in Northeast Pennsylvania, and we generally buy fall hot blossom honeys simply because I think there's a lot more complexity in the honey. Really, everything that you're really getting out of this dough is largely the Abiel yeast. So we use the dry Abiel. We use roughly 1 to 2 grams per gallon is what our ratio is. This one started at 1110 and finished at about 128, 1028. We do staggered nutrient additions. We don't have glycol chillers or anything, so it's largely the tap water comes out around 55 to 60, and so mix it into honey, it will get to be about 68. And since we're doing 50-gallon batches, it takes a while for the thermal mass to warm up beyond. So we're pitching, I'd say room temperature, or well, slightly below room temperature, fermentation at room temperature, so maybe high in 72 because we do most of this stuff fall to springtime.
I'm surprised that the finishing gravity is that high because it's sweet, but it's still fairly dry. I mean, it finishes crisp and clean. Do you put it like an acid blend in there to give it some balance?
No, we do measure pH on these, and we will adjust if we have to. This is just how wonderful that yeast is.
Huh.
I can't say enough about it. We did it as a whim just to try some beer yeast, and just love this yeast. It's dry yeast. It's dry Abiel. It's just brilliant.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's peppery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and so I mean, there's obviously some aspect of the local wildflower honey in this, but I would say 80% of the flavor coming out of this is all yeast driven.
Huh. That's very nice.
Beautiful.
Now,
it's beautiful.
Now, do you hydrate the yeast before you pitch it?
Yeah, we'll do a go firm to start it and hydrate it per the instructions, and at the somewhere around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we will pitch, and we'll then use Fermate O as our nutrient.
And the staggered strategy to the nutrients?
Initially was doing the staggered. I've actually started to do primarily 90% front loading and stirring the crap out of it and seeing if we can get away with less labor and playing with it. And we're seeing very similar results at this point. In terms of product. So staggering is good. Use it, love it. As long as you're using nutrients and keeping it, getting it in suspension, there's no reason why not to front load it either. Is what I am seeing. That's our result. So I know there's some debate in the community about that. Groenfeld Meadery in New England. Where are they at? In Vermont or New Hampshire?
Yeah.
In Vermont. I've been following what they've been doing too, and I believe he does front loading too. And has success with it. So that's why we've been playing. Because ultimately, I'm a lazy guy. I work hard, but I want to be efficient at working hard.
Yeah, well, whatever works, and this works. It's delicious, but complex. It's simple but complex. I don't know. It's my mead palate is not as developed as my beer palate. So with wines and meads, I still lack some of the the adjectives, but it is nice and simple. Yet and it's got to be that yeast, I guess. There's a spice there. There's a little bit of fruitiness in there as well. But there is also on the nose. There's a floral aspect, which has got to come from the honey itself, right? Yeah.
You're definitely getting a bit of the wildflower honey as well as those peppery notes. I wish I would have did a printout. UCal Davis is doing a mead analysis. They're going to make a mead tasting and smelling honey wheel, just like a beer wheel, in which it's all right, so you can pick out and say what these flavors are. And they sent a gas chromatogram of this mead, and it was really interesting what the different phenols that were really spiked on it. I just failed to print that out. So, so yeah, it's all yeast. It's largely yeast driven. I for the mead home mead makers, play with a whole bunch of beer yeast because there's some really cool stuff. We used a Berliner Weiss yeast on something, and it came out really good. You got that tartness out of it. In fact, we added Woodruff syrup, and we've sold a lot of that too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, do you have to treat the beer yeast any differently from the wine?
No, yeast. I come to yeast is yeast. We have a commercial product that we use a Fleischmann's bread yeast.
Really?
Yeah, we sponsor and support a local a beer competition, a homebrew competition, and we sponsor the wine and cider category. And the winner will make their their mead and their cider commercially. And so there's this beautiful, beautiful mead. It was a cinnamon orange mead. It was wonderful. Gets first place, best of show in the mead category. We contact the mead maker, Nick Cufulcio from Philly. I probably butchered his last name too. I apologize. And I asked him what was his recipe, and it was well, I put honey in a gallon jug. I had Cara oranges. We put cinnamon sticks in, some nutrient I got from Keystone Homebrew in Montgomeryville, and then I used Fleischmann's bread yeast. I'm like, what? So I did a small little 2-liter stir plate mead on it with the Fleischmann's. It ate through to like 16% alcohol. There was no off flavors because we used nutrients with it. And I'm like, all right, we're going to scale this up and we're going to do a 30-gallon batch. And it's beautiful. So yeast is yeast. Each one's going to have their own flavor profile that they're going to add, particularly the beer yeast when they have, the Belgian one here, obviously. So, yeah, if you treat them nice, they'll ferment. So I used to blame the little yellow pack of Muntins yeast in my beer kits for my early bad beer taste when I made homebrew. Nah, I think it was just me.
Now, you would think that that maybe that the quality standards or the QA on a bread yeast might not be as strict as, say, a wine yeast or a beer yeast. That's just my assumption. But so with the bread yeast, like you said, yeast is yeast, and as long as it makes bubbles in the dough and makes it rise, you would think that they wouldn't be too discerning about what goes in there. It would be interesting if there was any variation from batch to batch using bread yeast.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. Now we only did the one batch. But it worked brilliant. I mean, it fermented clean. There's nothing off with it. We sell a lot of it. It's something called ground control, and we sell a lot of that. Now we didn't just do it as a simple traditional or show mead either, in which it's nothing but the yeast and the honey. We also had Cara oranges and cinnamon. So I do have a rapid rise 3-gallon batch I did for a demonstration that ultimately we're going to do the 2019's Mead Day recipe. It was a Prairie Meadery's cinnamon and vanilla mead, which is just beautiful, by the way. Those are some fantastic mead makers out there. And so far the batch smells fine and tastes fine, and I think it's about 12% alcohol, so it will create alcohol. There's not, so I'm taking away my high horse from only certain types of yeast should be used. I'm like, nah, I'll try anything. There's no reason not to try it.
Yeah, we've used bread yeast for beers and meads before, but I just, I think this is the first commercial application that I've heard of. So kudos to you for stepping out there.
Yeah, no, and I thank the home brewer for telling it to be honest about what he used, and it was beautiful mead he made.
Now I'm on to the mead number 2, which is the Blueberry Moon, which is it's a beautiful purple color, as you would expect from blueberries, and very nice and fruity, as you would expect, and juicy. The fruit character is lovely in this. So give us some secrets about using fruit in meads.
Yeah, so this one I'm really particularly proud of. In 2019, we actually entered Mazer Cup commercially, and I was hoping for some really, really good feedback, not expecting that we would actually get a couple medals out of it. So this one took silver in the dessert mead semi-sweet category, and boy, I was happy. I was, yeah, that's an Olympic medal for us, you know.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah. So this is local blueberries. I did not know, and there's going to be farmers and other folk out there are going to be laughing at me, but I did not know there were so many different types of blueberries like there are grapes.
Huh.
I'm used to the big culinary blueberries, the ones that grow in the massive fields of New Jersey next to us. A little town called Lake Arrow next to us, there's a place called Blue Thumb Blueberry Farm, and they cultivate a whole bunch of different blueberries. And he asked me if I would be interested in making a mead with his stuff. And I'm like, by all means, bring them in and I'll sample them. And he brings a tray of like, I don't know, there must have been 10 different varieties he had. And we tasted them like you would taste, Pinot Noir grape versus a Chardonnay grape or something. Different acidity levels, different sweetness, different flavors. And we picked two of them. And I thought they would balance themselves out. One called Nelson and the other one called Patriot, blueberries. This was 200 pounds of blueberries and local wildflower honey that we fermented together. And then we stopped the fermentation using brandy made for us by a local distillery. We made the grape wine, and they made grape spirits out of it. So what was the starting gravity of this one? Look at my notes. This was like 1.100. And then when it got down to 1038, we added the brandy to stop the fermentation.
Huh.
So that kept the residual sugars, and it locked in that blueberry flavor so it wouldn't ferment any further. And so we brought it up to about 14% with the brandy.
So basically it's just raising the alcohol so high that the yeast quits.
Yeah, we killed them.
Huh.
Yeah,
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Now I think that may be the first time that I've heard of that approach, and I've been doing this a long time, Dan. That's it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this comes from the American Wine Society. The gentleman published something. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. He made a strawberry. He was making a strawberry port. And he described how he did it, and then stopping the fermentation using brandy. And so we just did the same thing. So this is where we got good at what we're doing because we embraced the fact we're winemakers. And there's 1,000 some years of grape winemaking, right? So there's a lot of stuff that's been proven and out there, and resources are there. And so we tap into those and really embraced our winemaking skills. We're not brewers. We're not beer makers. We're winemakers using honey as the fermentable.
Now this has a really nice blueberry fruit character. And you can tell it's higher in alcohol than the first one.
Yep.
But it's not a hot alcohol. It's not an off flavor kind of alcohol. But then there's an acidity. You mentioned acidity with the berries. There's an acidity in there that also offsets that sweetness or complements maybe that sweetness, so that it is, and here's one of my favorite words, balanced. It is, you call it a dessert mead, but it doesn't taste as sweet or sort of cloying as some quote-unquote dessert meads or dessert wines that I've had in the past.
Yeah, I mean, this is classified as a semi-sweet dessert wine, so some folk will sound like an oxymoron. No, dessert's got to be sweet, but no, there's different degrees of those. Yeah, we strive for balance, and that's where, like you said, is the acidity right? We'll ferment on the whole berries. We'll let it sit on there, and it's almost like sitting on grape skins where it's pulling out some different flavor components out of those. And when we pulled the blueberries out of this, we crushed the living out of them.
Thanks for saving me time and editing.
I'm pretty good with self-editing. And to the point where, where the skins look like shoe leather, we get them that packed, and all those flavors are coming out, which is different sometimes from when you're getting juice or some other some other source of the blueberry. So you're just getting the complexity of those fruits in there.
So are you getting tannins from the blueberry skins, like grape skins?
You're getting some phenolics or something, some other components. I don't know if it's tannins, but I equate it to that. I don't know the exact science of it, but I know that is the same complexity I would get with a red wine that I like to drink. And I'm really so this to me, you can substitute. Might be a little bit too sweet, but I would eat this with a steak dinner. I think we'll cut through the fat of a steak nice, or some cheeses like a I was going to say brie, but that's too soft. So I'm almost thinking like a gorgonzola or a blue or something along that line would be pairing with this.
Yeah.
This one too. It's all. I was almost wishing I would have added a little bit of oak to it, but then I'm thinking you don't really get it. So what you're getting in the nose is the blueberry scent, but also the brandy. So those grape spirits are coming and lifting some of that aroma up too to your nose.
Yeah, I could see that. Oak. You just a little bit of oak might be nice, but you don't want to add too much because I think it'd be a little too much to the party. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's true. You might distract from what's there. It's beautiful as is. Don't mess.
Mm-hmm. Now,
I'm glad you liked that one. I'm really proud of that one because it's all Northeast Pennsylvania source. It's all sourced within 25 miles of our building, so it's really showing. You live in a community and some, folk generally like almost poo-poo their own stuff. Oh, we have to go to California for the good stuff, or we have to go to New York or whatever. It's like, no, we have good farmers and orchard folk right here. We got good local honey. And as much as the distillery just started out, they make brilliant brandy for us. And that would be Lang Distillery in Anacoke. They're awesome.
Now you used the alcohol to to stabilize this one. What's your general approach to stabilizing your meads?
Oh yeah. So when we talk about winemaking, there's two concepts you don't really hear a lot about in beer brewing, which is stabilization and clarification. So stabilization is we want to maintain and ideally improve the wine's quality. Because if it's not stabilized, it's gonna be prone to oxidation as well as bacterial infection. So bottle bombs, as it were, if you have any residual sweetness. We generally use we'll sulfite. We'll measure the sulfite levels using what is our tool of choice we use? Oh, we have a venometric. SC300. You could get it at More Wine or More Beer or whatever to measure the sulfite, and we want to add enough sulfites to bring it up to around 50 parts per million. And people can Google a good wine calculator out there on what the ratio is of either ounces or teaspoons of potassium sulfite to add. We will not use sorbate in mead. It will produce more floral notes, almost geranium-like, that we don't want. So we sulfite only. This one, I think because of the alcohol, we didn't do diddly with it. We just let it go. But Andromeda was definitely sulfited. It was clarified and was filtered.
Yeah, it's clear as a bell for sure. Talk about your clarification techniques now.
Yeah, so clarification, if we're using front up fruit in it, we'll use pectin enzyme up front. We'll put the pectin enzyme in with the fruit about 12 hours to 24 hours before we'll pitch the yeast, and that will start breaking down the pectins in the fruit so that they'll start settling out during the ferment. And then we'll probably rack twice on the first racking is just to get it off the lees after, and we're not in a rush to get it off the yeast, by the way. We usually it's 6 to 8 weeks. We'll leave our stuff sitting on the yeast. We're in no hurry. We want the yeast to do their job.
Wow.
And that's, again, folk will have a debate about it. I'm just saying what we do and your mileage will vary. Then on the second the second racking, we will just make sure that there's no other activity, and we'll get more settling out. And then we'll rack it a third time. We'll sulfite it. We'll let it sit 24 hours at least, and then we'll add two fining agents. One being Kiocell, which is made from it's silicon dioxide, and that, from what I understand, attracts positively charged particles. After 24 hours, we'll add a version of Ketosan, which attracts the negatively charged particles. We use a vegetarian or vegan source of Ketosan because generally it's made of shellfish. A product called Stab Micro, and who makes that? And Antares is the manufacturer. And so that works really well, where we get a nice, clear, clean product. And then after, we'll let it sit that way for a week to settle out. We just started introducing, then chilling it. We don't have glycol or anything, so we actually have to put stuff in corny kegs and put in a cooler. So we just started doing that now. But typically what we would just do is we would just use a Vino Jet to do a filter. And we generally just do polishing filter. We don't do sterile filtering unless it's a lower alcohol product in which there's not enough alcohol to protect it from microbes.
Now, you're doing a lot of racking. Do you take any measures to protect against oxygen exposure?
Well, that's where the sulfite additions are. So when we'll rack, we'll add a little bit of sulfite at the time. That will protect it. We haven't had any issues with oxidation at this point. Initially, when we racked the first time, we're actually trying to drive off some CO2, so we're a little rough with that racking. And then the second time we do a slower pace racking. So we're not introducing a lot of oxygen at the time, and usually we're pushing a little bit of CO2 out of solution anyway. So if we were letting it sit for 6 months and then racking it, I might be a little more paranoid about it. But and at that point, when we're doing those kind of rackings, though, we have it sufficiently sulfited to protect against oxygen.
I'm sipping on the third one, the Collaboration Raspberry Melomel.
Oh, yeah. That's my favorite because I'm a sucker for dark chocolate.
Boy, the that gets the saliva glands going. Man, oh man, the fruit is very, very bright. The blueberry, the fruit is kind of like soft and mellow sort of. But this mellow is it really is. I don't want to say acidic, but is it like an acidity that just wakes up your whole taste buds when you drink this one?
Yeah, this was another special one. Before I opened up my own place, I had the benefit of apprenticing at a local winery called Honey Hole Winery. He had just started up a couple years prior to me, but he had a homebrew shop since 2009, and he's been making wine long prior to that. So I learned a lot about winemaking from him. So he asked me if I wanted to make his first commercial mead. And I'm like, damn straight, I'm going to learn on your equipment what this commercial size operation is. He's the salt of the earth family. I can't say enough about the winemaking and the brewing community themselves and the winemaking community the same way, where they embrace you. They want to do everything possible to make you succeed. Even to the point where I'm opening up a winery, just up the road in a sense from you. And we don't look at it as competition. We look at it as a camaraderie. And I couldn't wait till we did a collaboration with him. So this is our actual second collaboration. We did a bone dry raspberry wine. And if you would drink this raspberry wine by itself, it was like a dry red wine. The raspberry was kind of there, but it was austere. So we had a orange blossom mead that was really, really sweet and beautiful by itself. And we blended them. And just like you would, as a winemaker, who'll take different tanks of their product to find the right ratios to get the right balance between what I would consider a near cloying orange blossom honey wine with a very austere, puckering raspberry wine, to bring it together to something that really, really, I think, works really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a base sweetness there, but again, there's a balance of that really tart just explosion in your mouth fruit flavor that works well.
Yeah, this was, and this took double gold at the American Wine Society's commercial competition last year.
Wow.
So this was with the grape wine guys who were falling over the mead. So I was, again, we were very pleased with those recognitions that we can make a honey-based wine that is just as complex and wonderful as any high-end grape wine.
And again, this was a collaboration with the Honey Hole Winery.
Yep.
And what was the proportion? Do you remember what the proportions were between the two beverages?
Yeah, it was 51% mead and 49% raspberry wine. The starting gravity for the mead was 1228, so it was really sweet. I don't have the finished gravity on the mead though with me. And I'm trying to see what this. Actually, I don't even have the notes on the raspberry either. But it was bone dry. I mean, it was 100 was the raspberry, if not even less. It finished really, really dry, and not bad by itself. But it lacked complexity. It was a dry raspberry wine. Nothing wrong with that, but it did not have anywhere near the complexity until we blended them.
Yeah, it seems like that would be from hearing about it, it seems like it would be kind of a challenge to drink by itself.
Yeah, and particularly when people think of fruit wines, we're in the the Northeast and the East Coast, and generally when people think of fruit wines, it's soda wines. They're high sugar. You throw an ice cube on them. They're great for summer, but they're really, really they're sweet. It's nothing I would pair with an Italian, pasta dish or a steak or anything along that line. They're good for sitting on the patio or pool. And so when you say a raspberry wine, we knew it would never sell that. Simply would not sell on its own. And so when we played and did and the fun part for us was doing the blend. So you're sitting and playing with different ratios, 10-90, 80-20, and then you're snookered and you think you have the right one you like. And then you repeat the same thing next week to make sure it's still good.
Yeah, because your palate gets fatigued, I would imagine, tasting a whole bunch of samples.
Yeah. And so you write down what you did, and then you have other folk come in and taste and make sure you're good. And I want to give a shout-out to Hermit Woods up, and they're in New Hampshire or Vermont. I always mix up, and I apologize to both those states, by the way. But Hermit Woods Winery, the mead making community is just awesome. I went up there and was sniffing around and said what I wanted. I was thinking about opening a meadery, and he took me down and showed me what he did, and we're sampling stuff right off the tanks and that. And he's a winemaker, and he talked about blending and his approach to it. Again, he was a grape guy. He was pulling corks and drinking fancy wines as he was growing up, and applied that same technique to his fruit and honey wines. And just talking about him about blending gave me the perspective of what we needed to do, and making a couple different batches and stuff. And if they don't work, well, let's figure out how we blend them together and get something out of them. And if we taste something that's a little flat, well, how do we get that balance and complexity that we want?
Yeah, do you at least in the beginning or maybe along the way, have you come out with batches of meads that didn't come out as expected, and how do you salvage that?
Yeah, so we've had, I still have one in the tank that I'm not sure if I'm able to salvage, actually.
Wow.
Can't. It was kiwi fruit, kiwi berry fruit, which is not the same as the kiwis you think about when you go to the grocery store. It's kiwi berry, and first of all, it was a nightmare to work with. This stuff was like paste as it fermented, and it soured a bit. And now it's not vinegar sour, but it's tart. And we tried to blend it out a little bit, but I'm not sure what we're going to do with that. That may actually be something that we actually dump. Other stuff that we felt, so otherwise we've been lucky. Everything we made was good. We blended it in with stuff to make it excellent, or added something. So, all right, this is a nice base for something. Do we want to add some fruit to it? Do we want to, let's just oak this and see what happens with it. So we'll put stuff in rye whiskey barrels to see if we get some additional complexity that we like out of it. And we'll also bring a number of folk in, particularly the part-timers we've had, have excellent palates. They like to taste stuff. Some of them are wine folks, some of them are beer folks, some of them aren't any of those. They're coffee drinkers, or they make cocktails enough, and they're able to say, oh my gosh, this is good, but what if we did X, Y, and Z with it? So we're not quick to dump anything, which is why I'm running out of room with tanks.
Now I'm sampling the final one, and it makes me want pancakes.
Yep.
It's called Earthbound Maple.
Yeah. So this one, I'm trying to think what conference I was at. They start to blend. It was either the Cider Makers Association. I don't think it was an AHA conference, but I met they were doing a showcase of different New England wines, and someone had a maple syrup wine. And I tried a maple syrup wine when I was homebrewing, and it was flat, and you might as well just dump it on your pancakes. Yeah. It was just, it just lacked any complexity at all. And this gentleman, and I apologize for not even remembering his name, but he told me his secrets. Maple syrup, when you dilute it with water, has a pH of 7. It's very flat. There's nothing going on. So you have to do some acid additions to bring it down to around 4 pH. So that's going to give it some complexity. And then what we did with this was we aged it in a Dad's Hat rye whiskey barrel for a couple months just to get some additional character.
Yeah, I was tasting wood, and I was going to ask if if that was just my imagination or if there was oak in there somewhere. But
yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
You got it. You should get a little bit of rye whiskey. No, it's not a lot, just a little. The syrup's there, but there's a lot going on. This is I call this like a digestive. You're going to sit with a cigar or at a fire pit, and you're going to sip this and talk about stocks and say indubitably a lot or something.
No. So this is an Acer?
This is an Acer. It's not an Acer Glen. It's an Acer. This is nothing but syrup. An Acer Glen would have been with a honey wine, and we have one of those in the works.
I remember years ago, and I'm like you, I'm not going to remember names, but if you go in the archives, a homebrewer sent me an experiment with different batches of maple wine, just fermented maple syrup. And they were delicious, and that was my first. And I don't know that I've had one since, but it's complex. It's got that got the maple up front, obviously, but then there is that oak background, and then there is there's a little bit of there's a softness in there as well. And let me take another. Maybe I can put my finger on
it. Yeah, you're definitely going to get some residual sweetness from the maple, and then balanced by the acid. So we use I don't know if we use malic or tartaric on it. I have to take a look, but I get it finishes nice because of the acidity, and we're proud of this one too because this one took a double gold at the American Wine Society last year too in the commercial.
Wow. Vanilla. So, that's the adjective I was looking for, and maybe that's from the oak.
That I'm going to think that's pulled from the oak at that point. The yeast we use for the majority of these are all different wine yeast. So there's going to be D47 or 1118 are the two primary wine yeasts I use for these. So there's nothing going to come. I mean, they'll add a little bit, but this is all going to be the maple and the rye whiskey barrel.
Wow.
And the acid add to bring it to pH. pH of 4 was the key. Otherwise, this would not. You would pour it on waffles and be happy.
Wow. That's really nice. It is, obviously it's sweet. It's 13.9% alcohol, but there's a lot of residual sweetness. But again, it's balanced, and you take one sip and you want another sip, because it is so easy drinking. It's not syrup or syrup, as as a lot of people say. But it is very drinkable. So very, I mean, you got a double goal for it. So, what I say is not going to matter that much, but it is way good. It's very,
No,
it's delicious.
it does matter. It does matter. You've been doing this a long time, so your perspective, it's nice to hear you enjoy these.
Yeah. Awesome. Dan, this has been fun. The better part of an hour has sped by.
Wow.
So I'm extremely grateful for your sending these, and you sent a second set, which I will share with Steve, and I'm sure that he will be over the moon with these. He'll be in outer space.
Well played.
No, this is wonderful. Like I said in the beginning, I've got a great job. People send me wonderful things to drink, and I get to hear about how they're made, and it's inspirational. And so I appreciate your time and your expertise and your meads.
Well, I appreciate that. And if I could just plug, we do ship. We're doing almost 40 states. So, although your state's not one of them commercially, so
right.
Sad by that.
I'm well aware.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Of all places for you to be. Yeah. I'm sure it's actually one of the few states I have yet to hit. So it's on my list. I have 6 more states to hit in the United States. So.
Well, I could give you a list of places to go.
Awesome. But if anyone's interested in what we have, or if they're local or driving through, just go to spacetimemeadworks.com. And like I said, we'll ship, and we're at this point in time, we're happy for any business we get. Yeah.
Well, I would highly recommend any and or all of these that I've sampled. Wonderful stuff. Good luck to you with the rest of this mess that we're going through. And again, I appreciate it, Dan.
James, thank you, and thanks, Steve, for everything that you do for the community.
Well, thanks again to Dan. Definitely check out spacetimemeadworks.com if you're in a lucky state that gets alcohol shipped to you commercially. One day, maybe we'll be brought up into the 21st century here. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way this week, in fact. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.